I have seen 3 pictures of a man. The first is, of course, Osamu Dazai's 1948 novel, No Longer Human. It's a tale of alienation, abuse, and addiction that was published posthumously a month after the author's own suicide. The second snapshot is a manga retelling from 2007 from the pen of Usamaru Furuya. It's a manga that aimed to modernize the story for modern readers, and of course, bringing it to life with his wonderful art style. The remaining photograph is the most monstrous of all. A 2017 manga by horror's most prolific name in the West, Junji Ito. It not only kept the original time period and spirit of Dazai's work, but reframes Dazai's original text to be much more horrific and also bookend the author's own tragic end within the story. The question I'm here to answer today is the one I often see a lot of people ask online. If I had to pick one of these versions from my manga collection, which one should I buy? Well, don't worry, I've got you covered. My name's Matt, this is What You're Reading, and let's get into it. So, right off the bat, I've got a bit of a confession to make. I had often heard Dazai's name mentioned alongside people like Franz Kafka, and while I like Kafka's work, and I've read all of it, I am much more of a fan of The Trial than I am of Metamorphosis, and so I had seen the title No Longer Human, I'd seen some imagery from it, and kind of put 2 and 2 together and got 5, thinking this was going to be more body horror than it actually is. And then I bit the bullet, and I read the original novel, and it's really, really powerful. It's like 80 pages long in total. It is documenting this life of this character called Yozo Oba, and it is told through a kind of framework narrative where Dazai pretends that he has found some notebooks of this character Yozo, and so we get different snapshots of his life, which is the reference to the photographs as well, like literally seeing a snapshot of them, but it chronicles his early childhood, how he always felt out of place with peers, how he realised that by becoming the class clown he could be accepted into society, but how he always felt that he was faking that it was just a mask that he was wearing to kind of fit in. From there it goes into some really dark territory. There's reference of abuse, there's an unfortunate scene with sexual assault, and ultimately multiple attempts at suicide throughout it. So it is very, very dark, and naturally, to anyone planning to read the book, I do say those as trigger warnings because they're pretty prominent within it. I see why people talk about this book as much as they do, because it's got that thing that great horror and great works of fiction have, where it really sits with you. It really makes you question some of your own assumptions and generally makes you feel uncomfortable within the right way. And honestly, based on reading it, I was like, well, I know that there are 2 manga versions of this. Which one of them should I own? Is it the 2007 version or is it the 2017 version? And not to play favourites, I'm just going to do a bit of compare and contrast, and we can talk about what I liked about both of them. So, starting chronologically, I'm going to look at Furuya's work. Now, there's not much of his work published in English, actually, but some of you may know him through Gengaku Picasso and Lychee Light Club. Books I haven't read. Gengaku Picasso is something I've seen a couple of times on shelves, but after reading this, I'm definitely going to try and check out more of his work. It is very much, as I mentioned, a modern retelling of the Dazai story. It isn't beholden to it, and as you could tell by this guy's luscious hairstyle, it is trying to bring the story into the modern era, or 2007 as was the case. And so it reframes a lot of the work around that period. Naturally, Furuya puts himself in the place of Dazai and is browsing the internet and finds a blog post about Yozo, and so ends up down this rabbit hole while researching for his next manga, which naturally makes sense, right? It's taking that framework element from the original and applying it to this new work. It really dials up the erotic elements, it really taps into some of the more horrible things. It honestly kind of shocks you when you have the original in your head, and what Dazai is very good at is being pretty suggestive about what's happened. And to see that stuff on the comic page, you're like, oh man, this makes me feel really, really uncomfortable to read this stuff. It is honestly a pretty solid book. I will say, though, I do think by depicting this stuff as vividly as Furuya does, it kind of works against the original in some respects. It loses some of the subtleties. And honestly, it is definitely stuck in my head, but I don't know if that's a positive yet. It's too fresh in my reading to say. The art quality throughout is astounding. I really like how the dialogue has been modernized. I really like that it feels not like just retelling the same story in a new medium, but really adding something to the original work and trying to do something new with it. Then the Junji Ito book was pretty interesting to me because I'd often heard online the complaint that this was a straight one-to-one retelling. It doesn't have any of the creativity of Furuya's work. And generally people were really down on this, which, you know, as people seem to really love Junji Ito, I was quite surprised by that. And so I went into it with an open mind. And I think that people are selling this one a bit short, if I'm honest with you. I think what it does is quite interesting because much like Furuya's work kind of sets up all the titillating stuff at the start to be like, oh, we're here for a good time, person that doesn't know the story. Junji Ito kind of sets it up to be like, hey, you know this story as well as I do. Look, here's this moment with Yozo. This is the moment with his father and the dragon mask. And then from there, it quickly starts to escalate into the horror that I know Junji Ito for. There's lots of body horror, there's lots of gross stuff, there's lots of murder, and things that didn't happen that way in the book, but are used almost as tools to create this kind of private hell for Yozo as the book goes on. And naturally, all of this stuff starts to build, and much like Furuya used himself as a mangaka being in the work to frame the story, you quickly realize that Ito is using Dazai, and Dazai comes into the story as a manga character, and I was like, oh, this is pretty interesting. It ends in a completely different place. There's lots of plot beats that clearly draw reference from the original, but it is its own thing, and I feel pretty confident in saying that I think the start of this book is clearly a misdirect, and I think if you weren't able to read that, I don't know what to tell you, because it's generally there. I think to set your expectations here, and then it goes wah at you, as good horror should. So, which of the two would I recommend? Well, I'll be totally honest with you. I still think Dazai's novel is the strongest. I think, as I've mentioned, there's some subtleties that are lost by putting some of that on the comic page, and naturally it increases the sense of alienation you feel to Yozo. I mean, I know some people clearly relate to this. I personally didn't. Some of the ideas within it naturally resonate with you, but I think not being someone in my late teens, early 20s, and, you know, being a bit more grounded potentially in my life kind of made it feel a bit chilling. Maybe I am the society in which Yozo is complaining, but it didn't land for me so much on a personal level, more as an interesting psychological study. And so with the book, I was able to look at it objectively. With the manga versions, less so. But, of course, we're here to talk about the manga, right? And so if you had to pick one of these books, and honestly, this is the one that will stay in my collection, it's going to be Furuya's, because I think not only is the art absolutely outstanding, I've got nothing really against Junji Ito's art, even though I know some people are down on it, but Furuya's characterization really feels compelling to watch. Like, it allows a lot of the setup and a lot of the discomfort to really sit with you as a reader. Don't get me wrong, there's a reason this book is wrapped in plastic, because it gets spicy in places. But as with both books, I think that is there to set up an expectation for a rug pull rather than anything else. And naturally, Yozo's own idea of becoming an erotic mangaka is kind of part of the original story, so it has to be there. I would say this work has kind of stuck with me, as I mentioned. I don't really know how to reflect on it too much because I read it. It was one of those books you have to go for a walk once you've read it. It's just like, it's very, very powerful. I think some of the modernization and the way that it really uses 2007 Japan and the recession really kind of tap into some of the underlying feelings of the story. And through Furuya's essays at the end, you can really tell that he is someone that Dazai's original novel really resonated with. And he even admits himself at the end of the novel that why Dazai's work is so successful is because he was in a different mental state, and clearly one of great suffering, which is what produces the art at the end of the day, for better or worse. But honestly, because of that, I don't think I'm going to pick up this one. It was from the library. It was in my wish list, but I don't think I'm actually going to pick it up. I think some of the horror elements in this book actually kind of distracted me a bit too much, and while I ultimately like where it went, it didn't grab me enough to need it in my collection. Anyways, this is my thoughts on this, folks. I hope you've enjoyed. It's obviously taken a lot longer to do this episode than the usual ones because I've had to read 3 books and reflect on them and everything else. But I'm curious if you liked it. If you have read either of these or the original Dazai work, then please let me know down in the comments below which version you prefer. And until next time, where I'll be back with hopefully something a little more fun and light, be sure as always to read on. Take care. Bye-bye.